Okay. All right. Thank you for coming. That was a short break, at least I think. All right. So before we begin with my talk, usually when I go to conferences, this is my very first Greek conference, but usually when I go abroad and give talks, I'm trying to speak, with some accent. But now, most of you, I think, you are from Greece, so I don't have to pretend that I have an accent. I can speak Greek English. Okay, and now I can continue to my talk. All right, today first of all, before we begin again, you can follow me on my social media, or if you have any questions, you can either ask me here or feel free to ask me over email, social media. I will try my best to give you an answer. All right, now let's go to my talk. We will talk about UX and UI. What is UX? What is UI? This means user experience and user interface. So this talk, it's not about coding, but it's about how to make your project better. And maybe your project is already good looking, but we will try to make it useful as well. And I would guess, I'm not sure, but I would guess that most of you are also maybe front-end developer, or you're doing your own projects. Maybe you are working in not so big companies that are dedicated UI designers or UX researchers. So I hope that with these tips, I will help you and you will help your company or your own product. Okay, we will continue with heuristics. What are they? We will continue with 10 practical examples on how you can improve your product. And then in the end, we will have 2 quick sections. One will be tips for UX and the other one about UI. All right, let's get started with what UX is and what isn't, and the same for UI. Although there is an ocean of content out there, I'm afraid that most of them do a poor job because they only look at things from one perspective, but it's not only that. Usually they will say what is UX and what is UI from the perspective of the user. But it's not only the perspective of the user, it's also the perspective of the developer or the designer. And this is what we will do different today. I will start from the user's perspective because I think it's a little bit easier to understand it, and then we will continue with designer/programmer. All right, so from the user's perspective, user interface is what he or she interacts with a product, and the whole experience is localized in a device. Whereas user experience is how something makes us feel, and the whole experience is localized externally, so everyone can see it. For example, when we are using an app and we are in our phone, if we look at the other person who is using the app, if he's smiling, if he's sad, this can be an indicator if the app he is using is good or not. Okay, and now let's continue with a designer's perspective/programmer's perspective, and this is a bit more complicated. So we'll start with an analogy. UI is only the tip of an icicle. And this is something that we see. Every time we can see that. But it's not only that. Underneath that, it's a huge mountain that holds everything together. And it's not only that. It's the air, it's the sea, it's the temperature, it's everything. That's exactly what UX is. And we cannot have UI without UX. So user interface from the designer's perspective is what you can see and interact with, but user experience is what you see alongside with what you can't see and what holds everything together. Okay, and it can be both objective and subjective. I'm not going to get into details because I have a lot of things to mention today. So I will continue with an example. Let's think of an app, a riding-sharing app. Would you prefer an app that doesn't indicate in real time where you are, where your driver is, doesn't indicate how much you have to pay, doesn't allow you to save your favorite destinations, you have to click like 5 different buttons in order to do one single action? Or would you prefer another riding sharing app that you could see everything in real time, you could pay however you want, you could save your favorite destinations, and all of this stuff? And okay, I'm pretty sure that in this example, the answer is quite obvious, but I do have a point here. Sometimes when we have our own product, because we are the designer, we are the programmer, we are the users, we know the app perfectly well, we think that we have the perfect product. But let's try to give that product to someone else, not our mom, not our dad, not our boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. No, let's try to give it to an actual user and ask them to complete a simple action. Will they have the same interaction? Will they do it as fast as we are doing it? I'm not really sure. And not only give them and say, okay, do this, actually watch them and observe them. How do they do the action that you thought it should be done in 1 click or 2 clicks? Okay, that's an exercise for home. Let's continue. So why is UX important? Because at its core, it's first putting people rather than technology. It's all about people, and in the end, it's a win-win situation because both your users are happy, the business things are happy, you got the money, so everything is clear and nice. Now, what does a UX designer do? And trust me, they are doing a bunch of different things. Before we answer that question, I will very, very quickly do a quick history lesson. I know you're not here from this, but it's going to be quick. So, how did it start? Everything started from the man you can see in the screen. He is Don Norman. He studied engineering in USA, and then he started working at Apple. But what he did differently than everyone else is that he did a major in psychology, and from there he focused on observing, that's the key word, observing how people interacted with technology. Because yes, people were using technology, but technology was not like it is today. So that's what made Apple what it is today, and everyone knows it's really good and real clear. So I would also suggest you, if you want to get started, this man has many great books. Again, side note, you can find them for free. And they are not specific for designers, so everyone can understand them. All right, now let's answer my initial question, what does a UX designer do? And as I said, they are doing many, many things. Here, I have a few of those things. We will start from bottom to top. So it's user experience and analysis, content strategy, information architecture, and then on the 2 top layers, we have interaction design and visual design. So starting from the bottom, I'm not going to read everything, but here we have some basic stuff that only if we perform them, we can continue with the actual plan. And we will get into details in a bit. We will look at some of those stuff. So I wanted to mention here that you don't have to be a dedicated UX researcher in order to perform those things. You can just educate yourself, and we will do that in a bit, and you can perform many of these things as well. So yeah, second stage, content strategy with writing product copy and micro copy, selecting the right wording and tone for target users, etc., etc. And information architecture, this is the lifeblood that connects everything together, and it's one of the most crucial steps. And then the 2 other steps, interaction design and visual design, again, I'm not going into detail because we are going to see them in a bit when we will talk about our UI guy. Okay, so I hope that by now you have understood what UX is, what it's all about. You have understood the perspective of the user, but also the perspective of the designer or the programmer. And now we can continue with UI. Okay, again, first of all, and let's be honest with ourselves, when we hear the word UI or user interface, the first thing that we will think are icons, colors, and maybe some buttons, right? That's it, that's UI. Colors, icons, some buttons. No, I'm here to tell you that it's not only that. It has many forms, and one form that I'm also pretty sure that all of you know is that UI can be audible. We have these little small machines. Sorry, we have these little small machines in our home that we can shout, and they will give us all the information that we want. We want music, we want the weather, whatever we want, we will have it. This is also UI design, a different form, but it still is a UI design. And it's not only that. Let's go back, and we have this kind of form, which again, I'm pretty sure all of you can or have used. You all know that. This is not about fancy icons, fancy images. It's not about fancy typography. It's nothing of that. It's just something that it's simple and it works. Okay, now let's continue with our pyramid, and this time the UI designer will focus on the two top layers, but he will have all the research that is done in the other three fields. And we will have in the interaction design, yes, things such as iconography, typography, buttons, colors, etc. But it's not only that. A UI designer has to be a very, very skilled person. He has to know about typography, color theory, iconography, illustration, visual design, and a lot more. And then in the visual design, he has to make sure, and he has to focus on possible variations of a screen and how it will respond to different inputs. And a UI designer has to apply design patterns effectively, create component libraries, etc., etc. Okay, and now at this point, I hope that we have understood what UI is. And we talked about UX a bit earlier. Now we talked about UI. So as I mentioned earlier, UI cannot exist without UX. It cannot exist. So we see many, okay, this is going to be an example for Greece, but we see a lot of job applicants and they will say, I know UI and UX. Okay, how do you know UI and UX? Where did you do it? Because the other question is, in Greece right now, we have very, very limited programs about UX. So it's a bit tricky to actually know about UX. The other thing is that we will see our boss, our manager, saying that they want a guru or something in UX. But they will mean that they don't want a UX researcher, they actually want a UI designer. And when you will be the UI designer, you will say, okay, who has done the research? No one. So the designer will have to do the research. And if there is no designer and you are the front-end developer, you will have to make the design and you will have to make the research. So that is where this presentation lies, that a lot of time as developers, we have to do the design work, and okay, we will do it, but it's actually not just the design. It's the research before the design. Okay, and now let's continue a bit with heuristics. And the heuristics is all about making things happen with information that you already have. And this is what it will help you to figure it out and make your project or your product even better. There are many heuristics, but we will not go through all of these things. We will go only in the third column. You can see the heuristic analysis. So we will go in this specific field. Again, I would like to repeat what heuristics is. With simple terms, you can think about it as tips or as a guideline on how to create a better product. All right, let's get started. This will be our 10 tips. And of course, I want to make it clear for everyone that these tips are not coming by me. They are coming by Don Norman and Nilsson. They were manifested in 1995. And now if you want to do something nice, I would suggest you 100% to follow these rules. Okay, so tip number 1, visibility of system status. Imagine lighting up your phone and not having the time, the date, the notifications, email, a signal. How would you feel? Wouldn't you feel kind of naked? Like the first thing that we do when opening our phone, it's to see the time probably and the notifications. But how would you feel if you didn't have those things? You wouldn't want to like it. Yeah. So now let's go to your product. You have a product. Show to the people the things that they want to see. If they want to see the time, okay. If they want to see the notifications, okay. And maybe your product is something completely different, so you won't have these things. But show them what they need to see. Let's continue with our second tip, which is match between the system and the real world. People presume how a system will work based on the things that they already know. And they will use your app or your product maybe like 5% of their time, whereas 95% of the time they will use other apps or products. This means that they already know how other stuff work. And if they know how they work, they will try to do the same things in your product. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. If something is ready, use that. It's okay. Our third tip is user control and freedom. Every time we should have an emergency button or an exit or something. And sometimes, it's not good what I'm going to say, but sometimes we think that we have the perfect product. And if a user did something wrong, we will say, okay, he's stupid. But the problem is not him, her, or whatever. The problem usually is us that we haven't figured out something correctly. And we will talk about that in a bit as well. So always have an exit, have an undo, have a backup or something that is suitable. And because you're a developer and you're using the product, maybe you think that there is no case they will to go back or they will want to undo something. But trust me, people misclick things. People do silly things. You have to give them the freedom to go back. Let's continue with the fourth one, which is one of my favorites. I have one more, but this is one of my favorites. Consistency and standards. As I said earlier, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If something works, do it. You don't have to change everything. And just because you have like a perfect idea, maybe your users can't really see that. Maybe you have to be a little bit more specific. Maybe you have to use something that, you know, we have done something similar. I'm not saying that this is the perfect tip, but it is something that you should try to implement in your projects. Okay, let's continue with the fifth one, which is error prevention. And this also looks like a bit the third tip. So error prevention is that our users, again, will do errors. We have two kinds of errors. We have the slips and the mistakes. So slips is the one that we've already talked about, that sometimes our users will make mistakes and we have to have an undo button or something like that, a restore, something like that. But the other thing is the mistakes. In this case, it means that we as developers, as designers, as researchers, we are wrong and we have to take it back, we have to analyze it, we have to see why the user did something wrong. It's not about the user this time, it's about us, and this will take time. Errors is something slips is something quickly, we can prevent this quickly, but mistakes takes time. Okay, let's continue with our sixth tip, recognition rather than the recall. You always want recognition. The user should see something and understand what he or she is seeing. If they search something, it has to be with recognition rather than recall. Recall is when we try to think of something that it's very behind in our memories, like a date, maybe a name that we haven't used in a while. This is recall, and we don't want that. We want recognition, and I have here this example from Coursera because I think that they are doing a great job. If you are trying to type something, you will see images, you will see some big letters, some smaller letters, so everything will be easier. And the same goes, for example, for dates. You could have the date field, so everything would be quicker for your user. You could have some predefined fields and stuff like that, again, to make everything faster for your user, but also not make them think. And this phrase, don't make me think, is also don't make your user think. It's also a book from Don Norman. Alrighty, let's go to rule number 7, which is flexibility and efficiency of use. In your product, hopefully, it will be successful and many people are going to use it. That's the best scenario. But there lies a problem again, that you will have the first-time users and your power users. So the first-time users will want everything to be simple. Maybe they will need directions. Maybe they will need some extra tips. And that's okay. You should provide that. But on the other hand, you will also have your power users. And this will be people that they know perfectly your app. They will want maybe connectivity with other apps. Maybe they want something fast. Maybe they want shortcuts. So what you should do is you should provide something for everyone. Maybe you are in the case that you're using the whole time the product, you know it perfect. So maybe you are a power user. So think really well for your first-time user or for someone who is in the middle. Okay, and let's continue to 8. This is the second favorite of mine, which is aesthetic and minimal design. Oh my God, guys, we have seen some terrible websites, right? And this is the aesthetic and minimal design. Many of us maybe have our personal portfolio websites. Maybe, again, we have our own product. And maybe this product is very colorful, let's say that. Maybe it has too many designs. Maybe it has too many videos or musics or GIFs or whatever. No, I'm afraid that this is not so good. We want a clear and minimal design. And again, it's not something that I am saying that we want that. It's because we have research and data that the aesthetic and minimal designs do better. So the advice that I would give you here, and at least if you're not a dedicated designer, because if you are a designer, maybe you know color theory and etc. But if not, I would strongly suggest you to use white. Yes. You hear that correctly. Just use white color. You don't have to use every single color that you know. You don't have to put every video or every music or every GIF. Yes, there are many great GIFs for nerds and yeah, those things are great, but you don't have to implement everything. That is my point. So tip number 1 is white space, as I said, and tip number 2 is to make things a little bit bigger. Probably, and as I can see, most of you are young, and that's great. Not that I have anything with bigger people, but yeah, because many people will go to your product, make your letters a little bit bigger. Like, people can't read these small letters. So, again, to recap, we want 2 things, white space and big letters. That's the 2 main tips. And from there, you can obviously do whatever you like. But just keep those things. Okay, and tip number 9, it's help users recognize, diagnose, and recover from an error. We've all seen some weird stuff that as developers, we can't even understand them, let alone people that doesn't know about technology. We have seen some silly things like error, line, blah, blah, blah. No. Try to solve something to your user. Maybe, yes, they did something wrong. Okay, how can they fix it? What was wrong? And there are some great examples. For example, when you go to when you write an email and you say, okay, I have attached this, and you go to send the email, a lot of times it asks you like, you wrote attach something and you didn't attach something. Do you want to send this email? So that's a good example of error prevention. Also, sometimes we try to upload an image and the image is not uploading. Why? Is it too big? Is it like PNG and we can't take PNG? Why? What's wrong? So always do your error handling and prevent these kind of things. Okay, and our second tip is help and documentation. I briefly mentioned that earlier when I was talking about the power users and your users, the first-time users. This is where this one lies. So yes, you should strive to have the perfect product, but because things will happen, because maybe some people are not very well with technology, so we have to give something to everyone, and this is where this one lies. You don't have to have a big documentation, you don't have to have a very fancy language, you don't have to have like weird stuff. No, really, keep it simple. Yeah, just keep it simple and it will work, trust me. Okay, these were our 10 tips, and now we will continue. We have 2 more sections, but I will be quick on these 2 ones. So the first one is the do's and don'ts of UX. We will see some very quick tips. Let's start. So first one, don't assume you know what the user wants. No. That's why you should have your users. And sometimes I get asked, okay, how will I have my users? If I am doing something and it's not ready, we have it in the production. Well, that's even better. You know, you can actually buy users. There are platforms out there, you will pay some money, okay, but they will give you real users. So that's not a good excuse of not using users. If you will say, okay, but I don't have the money, all right, take your friends or someone that you don't like, because this person will tell you the truth. As we said earlier, mom, dad, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, this won't work. Just take something, maybe your ex. Okay, don't follow the hippo at the room. And hippo stands for the highest paid person's opinion. Yes, your boss is paying you, but that doesn't mean you should do everything as they say. No, have your opinion, back up your opinion, do your research, and everything is going to be fine. Do make the time and effort for user research. And don't just create a list of methods to check off. It's not just a to-do list. Don't prototype too soon, even if you plan to test it. So follow a specific process and then prototype, then design, then reevaluate, and then continue to actually coding. Because what we usually do, at least if you work on a startup or in your own project, usually we will have an idea and we will start coding. No. Okay, do focus on what people do rather than what they say, and we already talked about that. If you can only do one thing, do conduct user testing, and again, you can find users. Nowadays, there are many ways to find your users. Don't overlook existing insight from customer care representatives. If you have the chance to actually look inside the customer care representatives or your support systems, trust me, you will find things that you didn't believe. Very recently, I had to do that. I was checking some support tickets and stuff like that, and like for the company that I work, and I saw some things that I couldn't believe, because as a developer, as a designer, I'm used to doing things fast, and maybe I don't take care of some things that I should take care, but then your user comes and they will say this and this and that, and you have to go back and fix it, and you know the story. So do collaborate. You're not alone. There are always people around you. Do find someone qualified to do your research or be one yourself. And I hope that with this tip, with this presentation, I helped you a bit in that direction. And now let's move forward to our last section, which is the good and the bad of UI. Again, I will show you 2 things every time. The good UI designer and the bad UI designer. And you can pick for yourself in which side you are. All right, let's start. Okay, I have a quote here. Now, the designer's mindset, the good one. The good one listens to everyone from decision makers, team leaders, and stakeholders, whereas the bad one judges and suggests solutions all the time. You can pick up your side. The good designer questions the status quo and digs deep to find out real problems and needs, whereas the bad one follows the rule, you've always done it that way, and tries to fix only the symptoms. Now, the good one takes time to ask about what is missing, is always uncertain about his understandings and designs, whereas the bad one follows his assumptions and is always certain that his way is the best one. The good designer loves to be wrong and seeks feedback, whereas the bad one loves to be always right and seeks praise. And the good one leads, whereas the bad one follows. Again, pick your side. That's it, everyone. Thank you very, very much. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to ask me. What do you want to do with it?